Welcome to my presentation, an overview of the science of reading in under 10 minutes by Karen Walker. In our Foundation of Reading class, we have been discussing the science of reading. Today, I am going to go over 4 of the more prominent models that we have discussed in this class, and then I'm going to look at aspects, some of the few of the many that make up these larger models, and then I'm going to discuss how they relate to one another. The science of reading can actually be traced back to Greek philosophers, but the aspect that we are considering today has actually been around since the 1980s. Most of the models that we are discussing are just representations of what we've learned by observing teachers who were excelling at teaching literacy. The science of reading is actually defined as methods and strategies that we use to teach students to read. They have been proven through experimentation and research. The simple view of reading is the first model that I'm going to discuss. The simple view of reading is a model that explains how reading comprehension works. It is originally attributed to Go and Tunmer for a study that they published in 1986 where they were trying to clarify the role of decoding in reading. Decoding is the use of symbols such as the alphabet and phonetic sound representation to break down words for reading and spelling. It's teaching students how to sound words out. Go and Tunmer proposed that there were 2 components to creating fluent readers. The first one is actually language comprehension because that is developed from birth by listening to our parents and people around us. And the second one is learned, which is word recognition. Our vocabulary is created by words that we learn from our parents, and it is strengthened by being exposed to more words. Reading is actually the best way to do this with a child. Phonetic awareness occurs once children reach school age and we start teaching them how to learn using phonics. In 2002, Hollis Scarborough introduced a graphic to represent the simple view of reading. It gives us a more concise idea for how this works. On top we have language comprehension because, like I said in the previous slide, it develops prior to word recognition. The background knowledge, so the more words that a child is exposed to at a young age where they understand them, will increase their level of reading comprehension when they are being exposed to these words in text. Language structures is also important. They tell you when you have children not to baby talk to them because the more precise you are with your language, the more precise they will learn language. Vocabulary. I personally have an affinity for $5 words. I also have a 4-year-old, and he has developed my affinity for $5 words. I'll talk about that more later. Verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning is when you look at a word, and if it sounds like something, if it looks like something, that's when you kind of correlate one thing with another. Literacy knowledge. The more you read to children, the more they will understand the structure of books. Now, once we have a basis for this knowledge, we start exploring word recognition. Phonological awareness is something that we're going to discuss later, and it covers a large variety of things. Decoding. Decoding is the first thing that students learn through phonics. When you teach them the alphabet, you teach them the sounds that correlate with the alphabet, but that's where life is kind of exciting because there is only 26 letters in the alphabet and there is 44 different phonetic sounds to go with those letters. Sight words are another issue because there is really no way to learn them outside of introducing certain words, and then once students become aware of those certain words and you start changing certain letters, they can make a phonetic connection between the words that they know and the words that they do not know. I believe some of the lists that I have looked at, there are many sight words, but they try to start by teaching them a certain, depending on what list you're looking at, there's usually about 256 to 314. The one thing about Scarsborough's rope that I was very tickled by, I found this very amusing, when she was doing the demonstration for parents and other educators, she used pipe cleaners. And she wove them together, much like what you see in this model that we're looking at, where she takes the strands for language comprehension and word recognition, and then she winds them together. And then, once those two things have been complete, you wind those together, and that's how you create skilled, fluent readers. Aries Phases of Word Level Reading is a model that was published in the late 1980s. It gave us a map for how children develop alphabetic awareness. They have no knowledge of the alphabet when they're born. They just see squiggles, and we build that into a knowledge of letters, and then we build that into a letter of phonetic sounds that go with these letters. And then we build these letters together and you sound them out to make words. My problem with this study is that in the late 1980s, I was born. In 1993, I could read at an introductory level in second grade. Now, they're teaching students to diagram sentences in first grade. So I believe that we have evolved past this, but it was a good place to begin. Phonological awareness is one of our strands on Scarsborough's rope. It is the term, a broad term at that, that represents an individual's ability to manipulate language through symbols, rhymes, alliteration, and phonemic awareness. This is not to be confused with phonemic awareness because that is the ability to manipulate sounds in words. Thanks to the science of reading, phonics is the most widely used method for teaching people how to read. It is taking letters of the alphabet and creating a sound correlation with them through phonics, and then using this to build words. If you can sound out letters, you can sound out words. If you can say words, you can do it backwards and spell these words. A fluent reader is someone who can comprehend a text through word recognition and language comprehension at an accurate and proper speed with proper pronunciation. A vocabulary is the body of words that is known to an individual. Your reading vocabulary are words that you understand in a text. It is possible for a student to have a strong vocabulary and still not be able to comprehend a text. You have to watch out for this. If they have the right phonological awareness, they will have a higher reading comprehension. But if they just know the words and they do not know how to decode them on paper, then they could run into a barrier. Code emphasis is how most of us are taught to read now. It is phonics. It is a teacher teaching you a code based on symbols on the paper that you correlate with a sound. Now, if you had been taught to read in, say, the 1960s, like my mother, you would have learned through meaning emphasis, where they show you a word, possibly on a flashcard even, and tell you what that word is, and then you have to memorize that word. You can also look for cues on the page that are pictures, and by repeatedly seeing these words, you move them from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. There are people who are advanced readers who have learned from this technique, but by using code emphasis like we do now, it is easier for more people to comprehend. It's also easier for learners from second languages to comprehend, and it has been found through research and the science of reading to be the superior method. Orthographic mapping is using words that you know, like prefixes and suffixes, to deduce the meaning of words that you may not know. This is a more advanced level of reading. It's not introductory, it's not phonics. This is the main premises for understanding sight words. The science of reading is a very extensive body of knowledge with many tips and tricks that will help us teach students how to read. I hope you enjoyed this very brief overview of this very broad subject.